Can everyone confirm that if you have downloaded all the mentioned files, so that we should be ready to kick off the installation? Okay. Venkat, Mani. Okay, all right. Venkat, can't you hear us? I see among the 5 members, only Ishwar have downloaded the files. So what we do is now uh, we try to install the SQL Server on Ishwar's machine if possible, and if we encounter with any issues, then obviously I will be doing on my machine. So Ishwar, do you mind to share your screen? Venkat, can you check at your end if any audio settings were there? Oh, I see Ishwar already installed the SQL Server, so probably it would be better if I can do at my end. Is that everyone happy with that? Yeah. Venkat, can you please check at your end about the audio settings? Because everyone in this call can hear me. One thing, Venkat, are you connected through a phone or a URL from your laptop? If it is a phone, I advise you to connect through a machine. Okay guys, let me share my screen so that we can start the SQL installation. Let me know and when everyone is ready. Guys, can you see my screen now? For Venkat, I would suggest you to please maybe you can get out of this meeting and join it again so that it could help you with the audio settings. Sorry, yeah, I need to type for him. Okay, in the meanwhile, when Venkat rejoins, I would like to show you the files, the one which I have downloaded. So this is the actual file we need to download, and the file size would be around 4.2 GB. Even in the email which I sent you, I clearly mentioned the file name so that you will not be confused of downloading a different file. So the first thing, once we download the file, this is an image file. So what we need to do is we need to extract this image file So you can either use your WinZip, WinRAR or 7-zip, whatever the whatever the extraction tool you have got on your machine. So I have already yeah, so I have already extracted this file onto a folder. So let me do it again for you. I'm just deleting out the files. Yeah, so to extract, I'm using a 7-zip tool. Okay, I'm going to extract in the same location with this folder. So what it does is it gonna extract all the set of files, the binaries of this SQL Server. Yeah, that's good to hear, Venkat. So you can always try to rejoin whenever you find an issue. Venkat, you haven't missed anything at the moment. I have just extracting the downloaded file, which is of 4.2 GB. So once the extraction being done, we start the SQL installation, and I request you to please, entire installation will be through a wizards. So we need to try to understand what each and every wizard describes, and what are the options we offer is a major points that we need to remember. Maybe we need to wait for a couple of minutes to extract this. And in the meantime, while it extracts, I heard from Sham that few of you have got some concerns about the timings, the class timings. So is that true? Are you happy with the timings, the 5 p.m. CST? Yeah, then it should be fine. And I have shared you the link for the last two classes. Hope you have received them. And if I miss anyone, please let me know. I will add it. And guys, as we are doing the installation, it might exceed the 1 hour, the class timing. So please bear with me. We can't stop, or we can't pause the installation at middle and continue tomorrow. So just bear with me for 10 to 15 minutes extra today. So once you extract it, these are the files will be extracted onto a new folder, and this is what the set of file. So as we do the installation for any other softwares in our machine, the same way we need to select the set of file, right click on the set of file, and then select run as administrator. Please try to select run as administrator. Most of the times what we do is we just double click on the set of file, but at some point the installation will not proceed further, saying that you don't have proper permissions. So it is it is advised to run the set of file with run as administrator. And it should give up a installation wizard, the pop-up window from where we can start the installation. So this is the SQL Server Installation Center. On left hand side you see installation. Select the installation and we have got different types of installations available here. Based upon the server, on what server you are installing the SQL Server, based upon that we'll be choosing the appropriate option. So the first one is if you're installing a SQL Server on a standalone machine. I mean to say simply the example is, the best example would be your laptop, which is a standalone. And the second option is if you are going to install the SQL on a failover cluster. We'll discuss more in our later classes what is a failover cluster, but just at the moment, just think that if the requirement is to install the SQL on a failover cluster, we'll be choosing this one. And the third option is also still related to the failover cluster. And the fourth option we choose when we do upgradations and migrations. Don't bother about the last three options. Okay, going forward when we discuss about the fellow cluster, we will talk more about these ones, and for upgradations we'll talk about the last link. But for now we'll stick with the first option, which will be using a standalone server for this installation. So just select the first link, and even if you install the SQL and later you want to add more features, still you need to select the first option. That is what it says, new SQL standard installation or add features to an existing installation. Both can be possible with the same link. So the first wizard, it says setup support rules. Having said that, it is very important to read the content on the wizard. That actually gives us an idea what exactly things were happening in this wizard and what options we need to select. So setup support rules identify problems that might occur when you install SQL Server setup files. Failures must be corrected before setup can continue. So if you can click on show details, it will list out all the basic things it's gonna check before you proceed with the installation. The example is, you can see the restart computer. It will check if there are any pending restart notifications available on your machine. If yes, then it's gonna say fail. So to resolve it, you have to restart your machine and then continue the SQL installation again. And one thing is, we need to ensure all the rules are passed. If any one of the rule is failed, warning is still acceptable, but if you see a fail, then we need to resolve it first and then go for the SQL installation. So we are good at this point. So we have got administrative permissions and the restart computer is valid, and we do have .NET 3.5. This is one of the thing. This is a prerequisite. Before we install a SQL Server, the .NET 3.5 Service Pack 1 or .NET 4.5 is required. But basically, sometimes what happens is with the installation package, with the installation media, we do get those files. Or with the operating system, you will get the .NET 3.5 pre-installed on your server. So you can just click on OK. And the installation is one of the main responsibility or activity the DBA does. It's not a day-to-day activity, but still we have to do the installations and configurations of the SQL Server. So as this, you can see this is for a product key. As we have downloaded the evaluation edition, so we don't need to enter a product key. But in real time, you will be selecting the product key and you need to enter the license key for the software. And you will be getting that information from the Microsoft, maybe your manager or someone who deals with the Microsoft licenses. So for now, we'll be selecting the free edition, and you can see it's a 180 days trial period. After 180 days, the SQL Server instance will expire. So usually what we do is we uninstall everything and we install the SQL Server as a fresh. So you can go on to next. And these are license terms as we do for all other softwares. Even though we don't read the contents, we just go for accepting the license terms. can go to next. I see a question. If it is warning in production, we should resolve it or we can move to further steps. It actually depends what the error message is. Sometimes what happens is we see warnings for the firewalls. For firewalls, it says that firewall should be disabled. But actually, for our environment, we might need to enable it. So in that case, it shouldn't be a problem. But always make sure that each and every rule are in passed state. If you notice any warning state which might relate to the network or firewall, you can always reach out to the system team or network team. So you can go on to next. And you try to get any updates that are available for the SQL installation. But as of now, I don't want to include any SQL Server product updates. So I just go on to next. The SQL installation is pretty much cool. You don't need to write any commands or things, but the only point is we need to understand what the options are in the wizard. And if you can understand the installation wizards here, and then probably you can cover all the interview questions that are related to the installation and configuration. It's gonna load it again. Once the main setup rules are finished, the actual installation will start now. You can see. Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. You can see the warning symbol. It's still acceptable. The warning symbol is still acceptable for firewall. You can click on warning to know the more details about this one. What it says is the Windows firewall is enabled. Make sure the appropriate ports are open to enable remote access. Possibly we need I thought of explaining you all these things once we install the SQL Server, but as we are at point of Windows Firewall, so basically once we install the SQL Server and when a user try to connect to the SQL instance, they need to have a port number. Through that port number itself, the connections will be pushed onto the SQL Server. So the default port used by the SQL Server is 1433. This is an interview question, so please make a note of it. The default port of a SQL Server is 1433. Still, we have an option to change the default port to some other thing, but if you don't specify anything specifically, the SQL will take the port number as 1433. So we are good with the Windows Firewall, so it should be fine. We can go on to next. And here, this setup rule. So what type of installation you want to do? Is it SQL Server installation or SQL Server PowerPoint for SharePoint or all features with defaults? The second option is completely different and it is very much related to the Power Pivot for SharePoint. It is about the BI, and we are only going to discuss about the database administrative task and not about the Power Pivot and BI stuff. So we can get pretty much features from the first option with the SQL Server feature installation. So using this option we can install the database engine services which we are about to discuss in these sessions. And we do have analysis services, reporting services, integration services. These three services were not covered by this training, so we majorly discuss about the database engine services. So we go on to next. And this is the place where we need to select what features we want. If you remember in our last class, I have said about the editions, the enterprise edition, the standard edition. So this is where it makes a bit different. If you have got some enterprise editions, it might show you more details over here. And even if I select any example, if I select replication, possibly, and it's a rough example, it's not exactly the same point which I'm saying here. To give an example, maybe I want to create a copy of a database. I have a main database which is located at one point, and my requirement is to create a copies of those databases. So if you go for a standard edition, the limit would be around, you can make only 4 copies. And if you go for enterprise edition, it will give an option to make a copies of 8 or 16. So that is where the actual difference exists between the editions. So regarding the installation features, you can just click on the feature, and on the right hand side it will actually gives the description. What does that feature mean? The database engine services will contain all the tools and the other process of storing and retrieving data. Whatever the intention and what are the discussions we are going to do in this complete training is very much related to the database engine services. And I will be selecting SQL Server application because this is also a part of our training. And then we don't deal with the analysis services, reporting services, or integration services. Then I will be selecting management tools. So by selecting these management tools, it will install the SQL Management Studio. SQL Management Studio is a tool that can help us to interact with the databases. So if I go on to top, you can see the heading says instance features. So the features that are under instance features are very specific to the instance. Per instance, if you want to install a multiple instances on a single machine, then you need to select these options multiple times. And the next, you can see the shared features. As it names, the underlying features under the shared can be used by all the instances on this machine. So if I select management tools basic and complete, and if I go ahead with installation, and once the installation is finished, maybe after a month, I was requested to get another instance to be installed on the server. So in that case, I will start the setup file again, and I will come to at this place. I will just select the database engine services and SQL replication because these services are instance features, instance specific. But whatever the shared features, the management tool basic and complete, they will show as a grayed out. I repeat it again, if you install the SQL Server for the first time, then these options will be enabled, and once you choose these options and go ahead with installation, and when you come up with the second installation, when you run the setup file again for the second time, then these options will be grayed off. It is because these are shared features. Once you install this tool, that tool can be used for any number of SQL instances on this machine. So you need to install only one time these shared features. And if you look at the bottom, the shared feature directory for 64-bit and the shared feature directory for 32-bit. So this is a default SQL root directory. So in this location, the SQL will keep all the binaries, all the SQL information, the backend information or the system level information will be stored at this location. So let me quickly browse this folder. So it got created couple of folders at this location. So this is the default root directory. If someone asks you or if someone use some term saying that what is the what is the SQL root directory? So it should be C program files, Microsoft SQL Server, then it would be MS SQL or 110. What is the version we are installing? I hope 110, you know that 110 means SQL 2012 and 112 indicates SQL 2014. So once we install the features or once we select the features, and one more uh, recommendation is probably everyone usually what they do is when they install even these other features, either they are required or not required, what they do is blindly they select everything, what are the options that come up with the software, but it is a bad practice. If you don't need the analysis service, then don't select it. If you select the analysis services, reporting services and integration services and you are not using them, then unnecessarily these will put some load on your server. So when you install analysis services or other services which are really not required, but still the services are running at backend, will degrade the performance of the server. So please do remember that install only the features that are required by the business. So when you are asked to install any SQL server, then check with the application team saying that do you need any analysis services or reporting services or integration services. So probably in real time what happens is we will use a dedicated server for database engine services and we use a dedicated server for analysis services where we can do some analysis and BI stuff, and reporting services we use a different server which can be used for reporting purpose, and finally for integration server it is used for ETL for loading data and it would be a different dedicated server. And there is a chance where a single server can host all the services, but having said that it is possible but it is a bad practice. So we can go on to next. So do you have any questions at this point? And for this training purpose, I think it should be good if you understand what a database engine service or what a replication. I mean, for replication, we'll see more when we go forward. But if you still want to understand or take a time to read each and everything, then I would leave up to you. When you try to install, you can just select the feature. Sorry, where it is. If you select this feature, it automatically shows the description of this feature on the right hand side. So I have selected database engine service, SQL Server application, and then management tools basic and complete. Having said that, if you select this management tools and basic and complete, you will get a management studio, that is a tool that can be used to interact with the databases. So we can go on to next. And check the installation rules and it is passed. Okay, we can go on to next again. And you can see here this is instance configuration. So we have got two types of instances. Instances is nothing but the best example is a folder. We are grouping a number of databases into a single instance. We call it as an instance. Whatever we are doing is a SQL installation. So once we are done with installation, we call it as an instance. So at this point we have got two instances. One is a default instance, which means once we finish with the installation, and we create some databases on that instance, and if a application team asks you that can you provide me the connection string so that I can connect to the databases, I can connect to the SQL server. So what the connection string you give to them, how you want to call your SQL server and how you want to call your SQL server instance name. So that is what this describes. By default, it will select the default instance for the first time. If you want, you can always change it to name instance. But if the default instance is selected, that means your computer name, your laptop name will be used as a SQL instance name. You might get a better understanding once we finish with the installation. What I mean to express you is, once the installation being done, the default instance will use your machine name as a connection. Mani, I see you pinged something. May I know what it is? Okay, all right. So for the first time, you can always select the default instance, which would automatically pick up your machine name or your laptop or whatever the name you have got on your machine, and the instance ID would be MS SQL Server. It's a just ID. Once this installation being done, if you go to the services console, every machine has a services console. Let me show you. To open the services console, you can go to Windows R and then just type services.msc and click on OK. So this will give you the service console with all the services that are running on your machine. It's not very specific to the SQL, but all the services running on your machine. So let me search with the S. As of now, we don't have any services with a name SQL. But once we finish with the SQL installation, we might see 3 or 4 services will be created, and the service name will be MS SQL Server for a default instance. And again, this is a root directory where all the binaries will be created, and the bottom line is installed instances. As of now, it's showing nothing because this is the first time I'm installing the SQL on my machine. If I install the SQL for the second time, probably it will show me the first default instance here. And if you select a named instance, then you need to provide your name, whatever the name you want to call for that instance. So it's still possible. If you want to stick with the computer name, you can go with the default instance, and that can be done only for the one single instance. And from the second time, you can choose named instance and you can provide the name, a customized name for your SQL instance. So for the first time, I would be selecting a default instance, and you can go on next. And this is a minimum disk space requirement in order to create the binaries. What are these SQL root directory we have seen? All the binaries will be created over there. So you can see here. So the minimum space required is around 2 GB. So I have got more than enough that. So we are good at this point. So we can safely go to next. And then server configuration. As I said, once we are done with installation, few services will be created. Those services are nothing but the SQL Server Agent service, then SQL Server Database Engine service, and then SQL Server Browser service. So these 3 services will be created on your machine. So once these services created on your machine, they should run under a specific credentials. So if you look at the services that have already got on my machine, you can see the name indicates the service name, and it gives the description, the second column, and the third column, it gives whether that service is running or stopped or disabled. And then the next column is startup type. What it actually means is whenever you restart your machine, do you want that service to be automatically start up or you want manually to run it? So you can, if you choose it automatic, whenever you reboot your server, once the server comes online, the service will also come online. And the last one is log on as. So this is what we are talking about. This particular service, this I have got Skype installed on my machine, so the Skype service is running under a credential of local system. Okay, so in the same way, when we install the SQL server, that service should also run under specific credentials. We can also run under local system, but it is good on your local machine. But when we talk about the servers in real time, it is not a best practice. We need to run the SQL services under a domain service accounts. Domain service accounts is nothing but probably if you have already got a work experience, you will have a domain for each and every organization. It's something like the your email ID gmail.com. Gmail is a domain for the Gmail company, and if you go for any other Yahoo would be the domain. So if you are working for a Microsoft, then your account will be maybe venkat@microsoft.com. So we should have a domain account for the organization for which you are working. So it is not our duty to create those domain accounts. So we'll be requesting our system team or Active Directory team. They will create the domain account and they will pass it to you. So we need to make our SQL services to run under those dedicated domain accounts. It is an interview question. If I'm interviewer, I ask you a question that on what service account you usually run your SQL services. Then your answer should be the SQL services will always run under dedicated domain account. That's what our recommendation is. So as of now, it automatically selected NT service accounts, but still this is not a good practice. So what I said is I want to run these two accounts under a domain account. So at this moment, I don't have any domains, so I can't show you to get the domain accounts, but what I can do is I can create a user account on this machine and I can make that user account to run these two services. So to create a user account, probably I need to find this one. This is a new OS for me, so please bear with me. I need to find the things. Each operating system have a different method of creating the user accounts. So on control panel, I have a user account. So where is the new user account? Probably this is not the one. Let me try some other way. Manage. I'm just trying to add another user on this machine. No. Maybe I need to use Google to find it out. Okay, from start, then select settings. Yep. And then it says accounts, then other accounts. So here I have accounts. Then what it is? Other users. Okay. Then add someone else to this PC. So this is where we'll be creating. Having said that, different operating system have a different way of doing this. So if you don't know that, please you can just browse on the Google to find the way. Okay, I don't want to give all the information, instead just the name. Add a user without Microsoft account. Okay, so what I say is SQL, maybe just assume this server is intended to run an application called RMVP. Just assume it's an application, and this SQL server being used by this application. So to make it easy, I mentioned RMVP underscore SQL, the name, and I need to give a password. To make it simple, I give only 3 letters, 4 letters. Yep. So we can go on next. Okay. It's my application name. Okay. We have created a new account called RMVP underscore SQL. So now in real time, this we won't be creating anything on our servers. We'll not be creating any user accounts on our servers. Whatever I have did here, that will be replaced with a domain account. A domain account will be provided by the system team. So we have got the account name, so we can go back to the SQL installation. So here we need to browse that domain name, the service name, whatever we have created. So it's RMVP underscore SQL, and then click on check names. So you can see it automatically listed out the name, then click OK. And the same thing for the database engine service. It's RMVP underscore SQL. Right. Now on the next line, let me maximize the window. Yeah. On the next line, we need to provide the password for the service account. Okay. So the main intention to add account name is when the services are running, on what credentials we are making those services up and running. So we can still run the services on the local system or local service or NT authority, but it is not the best practice. In real time, we always try to make sure the service accounts should be running under a dedicated domain account. So once you provide the password, this is a startup type, how you want to manage the service. When the server reboots or when this laptop gets restarted, do you want to automatically get these services up and running? Then just select automatic. So I would change the agent to automatic as well. So I have made both the services, the database engine service and the database agent service, both are automatic. And one more point we would like to raise here is the database engine service is a parent service and the agent service is a child service. So we need to have the database engine service up and running, then only the agent service can start. So to make it easy, you can remember something like the database engine is a parent and the agent is a child. So the agent, if it has to run, the condition is the database engine should be in started state. So once we are done here, you can see on a tab the collation. This is much more important. What the collation describes is how you want to store your data in the database tables. So the default collation type is SQL Latin 1 General, CP1, CI is case insensitive, and AS is AS insensitive. That means if you insert a row in a table either in capital letter or in small letter, that means either in uppercase or lowercase, it doesn't matter. It will pick up the records when you try to read. And there are some applications that might require a different collation type. They don't need the default collation type. So in that case, you can click on customize and select the appropriate collation type. And again, we don't need to know what collation type is required for that application. We have to check with the application team. The application team should give us the collation type, whether they want to go with the default collation, then that should be fine. If they have any specific requirement for their application, then we'll be selecting the appropriate collation type. The best example is usually the SharePoint application, the front-end SharePoint application requires a different collation type for a SQL Server. What we say is a Kana sensitive. You can see here which is a grayed out. So this is the, they would require the Kana sensitive. Instead of ASCII sensitive, the SharePoint application require a Kana sensitive collation type. Or if you can scroll down here, you can easily look at this one. Maybe the China. The people in China, they mostly prefer to have the data stored in their local languages. So in that case, if you're installing a server for China, then you can just select the appropriate collation type, which could be here somewhere. Yeah. So you can see all different languages mentioned here. Hungarian, Iceland, then Latin, which we use it for English. And if I scroll down to bottom, then you can see Lithuania, Polish, Romania. So it's as per the requirement. If they want to store the data in their local language among all the mentioned here, you can select the appropriate one and you can go ahead with installation. But for default, it is SQL Latin 1 General CP1 CIAS. So please do remember this collation time for interview one. And the other interview question is, let's assume that the application team did not provide me any specific requirement for collation type. Okay, so I go ahead, I went with the default collation type and have installed it, and the SQL is up and running. Maybe later after a month, the application team, they identified that the collation doesn't meet their requirement. They would like to have a different collation type, and they will come back to DBA and they will request us, oh, we forgot to tell you that we need a different collation type. Can you please change it now? The answer is yes, we can change it, but it is not a easy process. We need to completely rebuild this system. I mean to say, when I say system, it is SQL software. We need to rebuild the SQL system databases. So when we rebuild the system databases, it's nothing but we are doing a fresh SQL installation. So that is the reason it is always good to check with the application team who are requesting the server to see if they have any specific requirement for a collection type. So you can go on to next. So any questions till now? Okay, I will go to next. Yeah, the next is database engine configuration, and you can see there are authentication modes. So authentication mode is nothing but when you log in onto your Gmail account, what we do, we provide username along with the password. And the same way when you want to access your internet banking, we provide username and password. So what happens is you need to have credentials in order to access the data. Either it is yours data or some other's data, you need to have credentials. So the same way, if one has to connect to the SQL server, they need to have login and password. The credentials are required to connect to SQL databases. So the security of those connections are of two types. One is Windows authentication mode. When I select Windows authentication mode, that means a user can connect only with his Windows credentials. Windows credentials is nothing but is domain credentials. What are the email ID he has got? With that email ID, he can connect to the server. The best example would be, I hope everyone using laptops, and maybe when you log in into your laptop, and if you go on to a window button on top, you will see the name. So it shows we show this is my machine name. So I have logged on onto this machine with this name. Okay, this is something we call as a Windows credentials. So when I have provided my credentials to RDP or to log in into this box, then those credentials can be used further to connect to my SQL instance. The same credentials will be used to connect to my SQL instance. Whatever the login permissions we use to connect to this laptop, the same credentials will be used to connect to your SQL instance in that machine. So that is what the Windows authentication. And the next is mixed mode. That's nothing but SQL authentication, I can say. The other type of authentication mode is a SQL authentication where you don't need to have a Windows account. You don't need to have a Windows account, but still the requirement is to create a account to access the database. So in that case, you can manually create a login, a SQL login and password, and you can give it to the users. So I repeat it again. The authentication mode is nothing but the credentials that are required to access the SQL databases, and we have got two authentication types. One is Windows authentication. Windows authentication is something which can be used your Windows credentials. Your Windows credentials will be inherited to connect to the SQL instances. And the second type is if you don't have a Windows authentication or if you don't have Windows account, then you can create a SQL login. So we'll know more about this when we discuss about the security, the topic called security, where I will show you how to create a login, how to create a Windows authentication login, how to create a SQL authentication login. Then we'll probably understand more about that. But at the moment, please remember that we have got two types of authentications. One is Windows and the other is SQL. When we select SQL, automatically it will enable these two fields. Let me go back and select the Windows. You can see these two fields were grayed out, and as soon as I select mixed mode, these two fields were enabled. These two fields are very specific to the SA account. Every SQL instance, once we build that instance, automatically a login will be created. SQL itself will create a login, and that login is called SA login. It is only used by the administrators. So we just need to provide the password for that account so that once we build this SQL instance, we can use this account to connect that instance. So I'm just to make it simple, I use my regular password, reconfirm the password, and the next here you need to make yourself as a administrator on this machine. So that is how you can make a connection after installing this SQL Server. So you can make add current user that will automatically add yourself as a administrator on this SQL instance, and then on top you can see data directories. Okay, just select the data directories. So this is more about where you want to place your databases. We have two categories. One is system databases, which will be created with the SQL installation, and the other type is user databases. So there are some standards which we need to follow where you want to keep what databases. So we need to keep all the system databases at one place and all the user databases at one place. So to gain a better performance, we distribute the databases across the drives. Instead of placing everything in one drive, we try to distribute them across the drives so that the I/O, the disk I/O, can be efficiently work. And one more thing is, if you notice, all the options here were pointing to C drive. As by default, it picks up the C drive. That should be fine. But in real time, we should not host any of the databases on C drive. Either it is a system databases or user databases, we should not create any of the databases on C drive. Please do remember this point. C drive is very specific for the Windows operating system. We should not use it for our SQL databases. The example is, or the reason behind saying this is, if you try to create all your databases on C drive, and obviously maybe after a few days, if the data coming onto the databases and the databases grow huge and huge, and at some point your C drive will get full, and as our operating system still exists on C drive, it leads to the system crash. Your entire system will be crashed, and the only option is you need to reformat everything. So to avoid all those disasters, it is required not to use the C drive to host any of your SQL databases. So the first is a data root directory. As of now, maybe I have got only C drive here, so that should be fine. I'm going with the C drive, but in real time, the standards would be your server supposed to have 4 or 5 drives. And all of you might act as a real time, so you should recommend your managers or your subordinates saying that we should not host all the databases in C drive, and the standard method is the data root directory should go on to S drive. Okay, and the system database, sorry, the next is user database directory should go on to M drive, and the next is a user database log directory should go on to L drive, and tempdb database data and log both should go onto T drive, and for the backup you can use your backup volume. So this is the standard process of hosting the databases. So we should not use a single drive to host all the databases. So this is a standard process. Each and every company have a different process. So in my current organization, we are using this method. We keep all the system databases in S drive. user database MDF files on M drive and user database log files on L drive. Don't worry about what MDF file or what LDF file. Probably in our going next classes we'll discuss more about the database architecture, then you will be aware. But just for now we need to keep different databases on different drives to get a better performance. So any questions till now? Nitin, have you got any questions or are you happy with this? Yep. So you might get a question from this installation side is where you usually keep all your databases. So don't say C drive. Don't ever say C drive. You can always give a different drive letters. Probably if you want to give a different drive letters, that should be fine. But the system database should go onto a different drive. The databases should go onto different drives. TempDB should go onto different drive. That's the main thing we need to remember. And the next option is the file stream. This file stream is more specific about storing the image files. We can still store the photos or the maps or these any files inside a SQL database. So that can be done with file stream. So we are not going to use this file stream in our classes, so I don't think it required to be enabled. So I can just go on to next. And this is error reporting. If something fails with this installation, do you want to send out the error log information to Microsoft? So no, I don't want to send out. So you can go on to next. And installation configuration rules, just check everything is passed here and go on to next. And this is a summary. We are now ready to install the software. Till now we have selected the options. We haven't installed, but we have selected the features and options. And now you can, if you want to reconfirm, just go through this summary and what are the path you are seeing here. This is very important. It is because once I click install here, then the installation begins, and it might take around maybe probably 10 minutes of time. And assume if the installation has got failed at 50%, and this wizard will not give you the exact error message why the installation got failed. So you need to go to this path. The installation progress will be recorded in this path. It's SQL root directory under setup bootstrap, then folder called log. Inside this log you will have a file called summary. So let me show you that. I can quickly browse that folder path. So once the installation done, we should see some summary file here. So if the installation gets failed, you always come to this folder, the setup bootstrap under log, and you can check the things why the installation got failed. The entire information, the detailed information will be available here. Again, this is an interview question. The question would be, I'm running a SQL installation and the installation got failed at the end. After running 19%, the installation got failed and the wizard doesn't show any valuable information. So do we have any other place to go and check for the error message why it got failed? Then your answer should be under setup bootstrap folder in a folder name called log. So I'll go with the installation. So this is going to take some time. We need to be a bit patient on this. So in the meantime, when it kick off the installation, I would like to rewind the main key things about the installation. The one is the features. We need to select the features that are really required, and don't select all the features which we won't use in our environment. And the next is the instances. We have got two types of instances, the default instance and the named instance. If you select the default instance, your SQL Server instance name will be your computer name. And when you install the SQL Server again, you can install the SQL Server multiple times. I just run the setup file now. Once this setup is finished, I can go back to the setup file and I can run it again. And when I come to the instance configuration window, the default one will be grayed out because I have already selected it. So I need to select the named instance and provide a customized name. And that name will be my SQL instance name. And then after we have seen about the service accounts, our SQL services should run under dedicated domain account. We should not run the SQL services under local system account or network service or NT authority. They should run under dedicated domain Active Directory accounts. And then after we have seen the collision type, we need to upfront check with the application team what collision type they need for the server. So based upon that, we'll be selecting the collision type, or else, as I said, if they come back us later, the only option is to rebuild the SQL installation. And the other part is the data directories. We are not supposed to create any of our databases in a C drive. So as per the standards, each company will have a different standard process, but as you will be going as an experienced candidate, so I hope you can use the same standard process which I have shown here. One drive for system database, one drive for user database, one drive for TempDB. And what else we have discussed? I think that's all pretty much about the SQL installation. So I would request you to please try to install the SQL services or servers on your machine. Please don't make it delay, because the next classes will depend on the SQL installation. If you don't have a SQL installed on your machine, then you can't do anything at your end. So please try to get the SQL installed on your machine. I will be sharing this video within a short time once we finish this session. So if you want to play it again parallelly by running the SQL installation, please do that. And if you are stuck at any point, please just send me an email with the screenshot and I will respond to my earliest. So as this is the first time installing the SQL Server, so it's taking pretty much time, but when I do a second installation, it will be quick. The reason is I have already got a shared features installing now. So when I install the second time, the shared features are not required. So it will be a bit quick. And once we install this with this basic version, then the next thing is we need to apply the service pack. Even in real time, when you install the SQL Server, after that, we are required to apply the latest service pack. So that we'll see tomorrow. We are already late today. So I will show you how to apply the service pack tomorrow. And then after, we try to look at the Management Studio. So any questions till now? Please don't hesitate for any question if you have. Ishwar, I see your question. Can you tell me once again what does system database contains? We have a separate session to discuss about what system databases and what user databases contains. At this time, we are just configuring the installation and configuration. But maybe in our next class, we'll discuss about these system databases, what exactly each system database contains. So don't bother about that now. So any more questions? Kaushik, Nitin, Venkat. I see a question from Venkat. What is server name and who will provide us? Basically, the system team will build a server, a Windows server. And again, we need to provide the naming convention, how you want to call that server. If the server will be used for an application called maybe RMVP, take an example of RMVP, then you would be naming something like your organization name or your domain name. Let's say your domain name is global. Then you will use the starting three letters GLO, then your server name, that is your application name, RMVP. Then if you want to use it as SQL, then you can use a SQL. So it ultimately depends what name you are using. But finally, when someone looks at the server name, it should give them some basic information saying that, okay, if by reading this server name, I can easily identify this server is being used by this application. And the server will be built by the system team. Once the server is built with all the drives, then it will be handed over to us with the admin permissions. Then we log on onto the server, that is we RDP onto the server. In order to RDP onto the server, the short method is Windows R. As an experienced person, we always need to use shortcuts. We should not go on to each and every step to reach out the point. We need to make ourselves more familiar about all these shortcuts. So you can just in run you can type mstsc and then enter. So here you can provide your server name and then click on connect. Upon clicking on connect, it will ask you to provide your password. It will automatically take your username, your Windows username. You just need to provide your password and then it will take you onto the system. Venkat, did I answer your question? Yeah, the installation is also successfully completed. So we need to scroll down and ensure all the features were successfully installed. And you see here, a summary log file have been saved into the following location, the same setup bootstrap underscore under log. So you can click on this to check what the progress it recorded. It should be okay with the notepad. So you can see the history information or the log record, when the installation started and when the installation finished and what's the machine name, and then after what you are installing, it's a SQL 2012, and where's the setup file located, and then what is the service account you used and what is the collision type used. Everything will be stored in this file. So that is what I said, if the installation fails, you still need to go onto this path. So please do remember at least this folder name, setup bootstrap, for interview purpose. So you can click on close, and with this we have done with the installation of the SQL. So I can quickly show you the management studio and to provide the connection string. And again, in order to open the management studio, you can go to Windows R, then type SSMS. Sorry, one second. Yep. Maybe from this version, I mean to say in Windows 10, it's not allowing me to search as SSMS, but in your real servers, you should easily connect using SSMS in your start window, in run window. But still, in these type of servers, if you have got Windows 10 or any other operating system, the other way to open is just type Management Studio, and the top one, it will give you the option. You can just click on this. And the other way is you can go to Windows and then all apps, and you can scroll to bottom. We already have on top, but you can still see other options that are related to your SQL. You can see this all the related to the SQL, and we will be having a SQL configuration manager as well. Yeah, I need to show you the services. While I was installing the SQL Server, I said services will be created, right? So just refresh this window, and now you see there are two services, totally three services are created. We do have a VSS writer, but it's not really required for our discussions now. But these two services are used in order to keep your instance running. If these two, you can see these two services are running at the moment. If any of these server is in stopped, I mean this, if these services are in stopped, then you are unable to connect your SQL instance. Okay, this is the Management Studio. I will be finishing in a couple of minutes of time. Just want to show you the things here. So this is the Management Studio, and using this tool we interact with the backend databases. So this is the server name. I have selected default instance, so my machine name is desktop hyphen some alphanumeric number. So it automatically picked up this name, and again you can see the Windows authentication. As it is a Windows authentication, it automatically picks up my name. You can see a Vishu. It is the credentials that I have used to log in onto this laptop. So it automatically picks up that thing, and you can just click on connect. So it makes a connection to a SQL instance. So this is how it looks like, and from next day onwards, maybe from tomorrow we'll be doing a service pack, and then we do other configurations, and probably in our next to next class we'll deal about the other specifications on this one. But 99% of the time the DBA will spend on this tool. So once we start using this tool, you will be very much familiar. Okay guys, that's it from my side. I don't want to take much time today. So if you don't have any questions, we can wind up the call. And as I requested, please try to install the SQL today itself, because it would be tough for you if you make delay, because probably from tomorrow or day after tomorrow we'll be discussing about all these things inside the Management Studio. So you need to have SQL installed to get this Management Studio, and do it 2 times. Install 2 SQL instances, one with the default instance, and run the setup file again, and you can select the same options, and the only difference is you need to select named instance and provide a name. That's it. And you can always drop me an email if you're stuck at some place with installation, and if possible we try to troubleshoot in our next class. Okay guys, if you don't have any questions, I will close the call now, and we'll be back tomorrow. Okay guys, thank you very much. Have a good day.